Hello, and welcome to 5-Year Club video number 301. Tonight's article is on saving money. Why? Because saving money is really the core of building wealth. Obviously, if you don't save any money, it's really difficult to grow wealthy. And saving money is really the biggest difference between people who grow net worth and people who don't. It's not investment returns. It's not taxes, it's not investment fees, it's really just whether you put away the money in the first place. And here's an article by Emily Capiello from Reader's Digest. I didn't buy anything extra for 3 months. Here's how much money I saved. This is a person who went on a spending diet for 3 months, and this is something that I encourage people to do. Pick a period of time, whether it's 1 week, 1 month, whatever it is, whatever you think you could do. Maybe you should pick a week, and then after that week is over, then maybe you'll be like, you know what? Let's do 2. After that 2 weeks is over, you could say, you know what? Let's finish out the month. Just one more lap, one more day around the no spending carousel. And you learn a lot in this time, and I've learned a lot each time that I've done this. Typically I do it, say January through April or May. And then I try it again. December can be hard because of holiday spending. August was not good for me this year, but September was good. October was pretty good. Now I'm in November and I'm trying to make that good. The summer is rough for me. And usually December is not the best, although December was actually kind of decent last year. I try to pick like a single month or 2 months or 3 months where I just really hardcore try not to spend anything. But rather than talk about my experience, let's look at someone else's experience. Yes, this was tough, but cutting back on some of my spending habits netted me thousands. I've spent my life in a weird relationship with money. I always worked hard and made more money than most people my age, but money still stressed me out. I felt like I never had enough, and I always felt like I had nothing to show for my hard work in regards to savings. After stumbling upon Brianna Firestone, founder of the School of Betty, a platform that empowers women to create better relationships with their money, time, and energy, I found myself inspired to do a no-spend month. The result? I saved more than $1,000. It was like finding money in my winter coat pocket after a long summer. But not only that, I realized that I was using spending like a crutch, much like an emotional eater would use food. I'm an emotional eater too, so life is really a lot of fun. Here are 5 things I eliminated and how I monitored my expenses more closely. Which is apparently a different article. Okay. The most eye-opening thing a no-spending challenge can do for you and your finances is shed light onto the emotions and the behaviors you have around your money that have become a habit. Most individuals don't realize that they are spending out of habit and based on their emotions, explains Firestone. Figuring out my triggers and knowing that I was able to sock away a good chunk of money in only 30 days, I set out to do a longer no-spend challenge. This time I was taking on 3 months of spending on nothing non-essential. My rules were simple. I was only allowed to spend money on essentials. Essentials to me meant my normal bills, mortgage, lighting, cable, phone, car payment, car insurance, gas, oil, and groceries from the grocery store. In my 30-day challenge, I cut back on spending, but this time I eliminated all of the extras. SoulCycle, Starbucks, SiriusXM, and manicures all had to go. No new clothes, no new shoes, no lunches at Chipotle. I had already cut costs after my first round too, scaling back on my data plan, cable package, and finding other ways to save money around my home, like replacing all of my lights to money-saving LEDs. So I was already reaping those benefits too. I did, however, have an exception to this rule. gift purchases for events that happened during that time, like a bachelorette party or birthday. But I budgeted for those events before I began my 90 days of no spending, and I set aside the money if I knew I would have a financial obligation. Easy for mom's birthday, not so easy when your friend is expecting a baby. I also allowed myself one night out with friends per month to avoid going stir crazy, but I stuck to my budget. Or stuck to a budget. This also allowed me to see what type of experience was worth spending money on and what experience I was wasting money on. It helped me focus as well, knowing that there could be a bit of a reward when I really wanted to splurge on something ridiculous. It's important to go into a challenge with the expectation that it won't be perfect. In fact, it's great to build in some treats and rewards along the way, says Firestone. After completing the 90-day challenge, my jaw hit the floor when I tallied up my savings. I was almost $4,000 richer. The rewards were more than financial. I was also less stressed about my finances. Finally, I was able to discern between my needs and my wants. The process enabled me to spot purchases driven by emotions. Even better, I shifted the way I valued money. For example, the time and money I spent socializing with my friends or my mom felt far more valuable to me than the fleeting pleasures of purchasing, say, 2 new sweaters, which would have cost about the same. Firestone says that while this demanding no-spend approach may work for some people, you don't have to give up everything in order to save some extra money. In fact, she explained that there are plenty of other ways to do a money challenge. All you have to do is look for simple ways to cut back a little. A no-spending challenge doesn't have to be extreme in order to have success. You'll actually have more success if you set realistic expectations. For example, if you go to Starbucks 7 days a week, try cutting that down to 3 and plan those days ahead of time so they are intentional and not driven by your emotions, she says. Next, learn the 17 habits of people great at saving money. You know what? I actually disagree with this advice. And I think it's easier to cut out Starbucks than to switch from 7 times to 3 times. Simply because if you switch to 3 times, you have to keep track of those 3 times. You have to record which 3 days those are going to be. You have to tell people, oh, I only go 3 days a week, and then they get to argue with you about which 3 days they're going to be. If you just say, I'm not going to Starbucks, period, because I'm saving money on coffee, there's no thinking involved. You're just not going to Starbucks. And I find those rules to be the best simply because there's not any analytical thinking involved in implementing them, and your life is already fairly complicated trying to save money in the sense that, like, you know, if you're cooking your own food or you're eating more at home from the grocery store, now you have to think about what you're going to buy at the grocery store, how it's going to be cooked, what kind of recipes you have, what food you have left over from the last time. You don't have to think about any of that when you go to a restaurant. So what we want to do is when we're trying to save money, we want to offload as much thinking as possible so that we don't get so overwhelmed by all the little details that we now have to work through that we give up and we just go eat dinner at a restaurant because we don't have time to do meal planning because we spent an hour thinking about whether we should go to Starbucks that day. The other thing I guess I'd want to point out here, so this gift purchases thing, I'm totally on board for this. You know, not that you have to do like super extravagant gifts, but like, you know, spend money on gifts if it comes up. People are important. It has to be proportional in your budget. So if you're not saving any money right now, you have to stop buying gifts because saving money is more important than buying gifts for other people. But if you have hit your savings amount, you know, 20%, 30%, 50%, you know, however aggressive you're being, I would rate gifts above like personal stuff for yourself. I think in the long run, they will bring you more joy. And the final thing that I think I'd like to highlight is that you don't really understand your emotions around money until you force yourself not to spend it, until you force yourself to change, until you transfer the money into your bank account so it's not even there to spend. Sometimes people say, I'm not going to spend, and instead they just spend the money on something different and new than what they have been spending the money on, because they didn't actually transfer it to a savings account. You have to get the money out of your hands and transfer it into a savings account and not have the money. And what you're going to find when you don't have the money and you're forced not to purchase those things is that you actually have the opportunity to see what your life is like without spending the money. And there are going to be some parts that you thought were painful that are not, and there's also going to be some parts that are kind of painful. And you're going to realize that like those painful parts, some of them are stupid. You're like, why am I so annoyed by not having this? I don't want to live this way. I don't want to live where I am so dependent on spending money in this stupid way emotionally. And that's when you start thinking about like, okay, what's happening with my emotions? What's going on? Where am I putting my identity? What do I value in relationships? What are my priorities in life? You get to think about all those things, and you have time because, you're spending a little bit more time at home instead of going out, generally speaking, when you're saving money. But point is, you think you understand your emotions around spending money right now, but you don't. You don't until you suffer some by forcing yourself not spend money for a month, for a long time. And you grow out of that. You react to that pain and to those feelings, and you decide to change things about your life, and you feel good about those decisions because now you actually have some experience to support them, and you know it's the right thing. And so, yeah, no spend months, definitely go for it. It's hugely personally beneficial and educational. All right, well, that is it for video number 301. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you will pick out a no spend month. No spend November is a thing if you're not doing no shave November. December is another good one. Cook something nice for your loved ones. January, February, March, April, those are all really excellent because you can just hibernate inside. But that is it for this video. Have a fabulous evening.